Welcome. My name is Logan Skis, and in this video, I had the privilege of interviewing Robyn Grable. Robyn is a visionary leader and an advocate in the field of skills-based training. She's prior military service with a background in the Navy, where she joined in 1979. She confronted gender-based barriers while advocating for women's roles. After she got out, she faced difficulties translating her military skills into the civilian workforce. That led her to start from scratch. She overcame a number of obstacles. It was marked by having her skill set undervalued. Robyn's story is one of perseverance. From being pigeonholed in jobs to advocating for veterans and military spouses, Robyn founded her own company, leveraging these experiences to create a skills-based hiring platform. She shares candidly about the struggles and triumphs of entrepreneurship, emphasizing the importance of belief in oneself. Robyn's story is one of resilience, innovation, and dedication to making a tangible difference in people's lives. Her journey offers invaluable lessons for anyone facing career transitions, entrepreneurship, or advocating for change. It was an absolute pleasure to connect with Robyn, and I highly encourage you to check out the full conversation. So without further ado, I give you Robyn Grable. And we're live. Hi, Robyn.
Hi, Logan.
I've been looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story and really just help others that are along the journey. David Meltzer calls it paying the dummy tax. So I've paid a lot of dummy tax in my lifetime. So happy to help anybody that's on the journey after me.
I love that dummy tax. It in my mind, I think about starting any new endeavor, whether it be a business, a new role in your career. When you see someone who's further down the trail, so to speak, who's summited a few times, it may seem like superpowers got them there, and humble beginnings, it can be sometimes difficult to connect to that end state, to someone who's further advanced in their career or their business. And I wonder if we can disambiguate or demystify some of the journey that you've taken to reach those summits and the lessons you've learned along the way to hopefully condense others' learning curve and perhaps inspire them to keep pushing through when they encounter the inevitable adversities.
Yes, absolutely. And there it is definitely a learning curve. And I have learned a lot and I've had my share of struggles along the way, but it is so rewarding and you can't give up. So it's a poignant time right now for me to have this conversation with you just because we're going through some changes within the company and learning even more now that even though we've been around for over 6 years, it's like we're still learning. You're always learning. As a business owner, you're always figuring out what's next or how do you get through this hurdle or how do you pivot the company. So good timing.
Fantastic. So the big question then is, Robyn, where did it all begin for you?
In a little town in Indiana, so if you go back that far. So really it really did begin for me as a stepchild and having to navigate step families and all of those hurdles and um, dysfunctional family life and whatnot. So, what led me then to going into the Navy right out of high school. So, but as a female in 1979, going into the Navy was questionable, and people thought, why are women there? We couldn't do certain roles. We weren't allowed to be in combat of any sort. We weren't allowed to even be close to any sort of combat roles. And so it was then that I started learning about advocating for my skills. And I remember clearly multiple times saying, if I have the skills, if I can pass the test, if I have the strength and the intelligence, why can't I do the job? And it was simply because I am a female. And so that really started my journey of being advocating for not only women, but just people that have the skills, which ultimately led me to creating the company that I run today. So, but along the way, when I got out of the Navy, of course, I did very well in the Navy. I advanced very quickly once I did get into a role, advanced very quickly, got into a lot of great opportunities, loved being in uniform, loved being part of that community. When I left the Navy after 9 years, never had a resume before. So Had to get a civilian job, went to a resume writer, and they said, we have no idea how to translate your skills or understand how
Wow.
to transcribe what you did in the military. And then on top of that, you're a female. No one's going to understand why you were in the military, or they'll have misperceptions about why you were in the military. So basically said, go to a staffing agency, get a job as an administrative assistant, and work your way back up. So and I didn't think anything about it. I just spent 9 years in the Navy, and I could do anything, right? And I've been told I've got to do this, that, and the other, and I was used to being told what to do, so I just did. Didn't question it. Didn't really say, well, wait a second. I have all this training from the military. Some of the best schools in the world have taught me the things I know how to do. Not to mention leadership and all these other things that come along with being military trained, but I didn't question it. And so I started my career over. And so if you look at that timeline and I was a single mom at the time as well. So I mean, I had to get a job. I had to put food on the table for my daughter and I. And so if you look at the time I got out of the Navy and fast forward 12 years when I finally got a job at a corporate Fortune 500 company, doing the same job I was doing when I got out of the Navy, that 12-year span, I had moved to 4 different states and had 10 different employers. So, but
Wow.
it was quite the adventure, actually, but a lot of lessons there. And it's really part of what we try to help veterans today and military spouses avoid today, because I would get bored, or I knew I wasn't being challenged. I wasn't utilizing the skills I had, and I was certainly not being paid what I was worth. So I would leave and go to the next thing, and finally found a home at that Fortune 500 company. But then again, more challenges, surfaced because I was so good at what I did. They wouldn't let me advance. They didn't want me to do anything else because I was so good at what I was doing. And then I finished my master's. I worked on my master's for about 4 years, and met an Army veteran's wife at a chat room. And she'd commented that her husband had been out for 6 months, could not get an interview, and he was spiraling downward. And you hear a lot of the statistics about veterans and not being able to find work, or they're underemployed, that kind of thing. So that really kind of jump started where I'm at today, because I was like, it's 25 years later. Why is this still happening to military getting out and rejoining the civilian marketplace? We have so many skills to offer. So that started my journey. I started volunteering for a nonprofit, and kind of weighed the pros and cons of, I really need to do something about this, but I have this great corporate job that pays me very well, and the pros and cons of both of those situations. And then I took the leap of faith, started my own company, and that's where we are today.
Thank you for sharing that.
A lot of
So
information there.
it's a fantastic first run, first pass at a higher level. I'm wondering, Robyn, if you could put yourself back at the beginning of the story when you were contemplating joining the military in '79, was it?
Yeah, 1979.
And what was the thought process that drew you to the Navy amidst all of the branches?
Timing. I knew that because of family situations, I couldn't go to college unless I was going to try to do it part time and work my way through. And even then, I couldn't fill out the FAFSA form. We couldn't divulge my stepfather's salary information, so I just couldn't even get any sort of support to go to college. And the Navy recruiter came to my high school one day, and said, "Join the Navy, see the world." I was like, yes, I'm in the middle of Indiana. I'm a landlocked state. I've never been near the water. Navy, that sounds terrific. And so I did. And so I'll never forget when I went to the or you have to go to the office and kind of fill out paperwork and take tests and all these things. And my mother saying to me, please don't sign up for anything yet. And I remember coming home so excited. That was May 15th, and I left on July 24th. So I was
Wow,
ready. It wasn't a
that's a
hard
quick
decision.
turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, it really wasn't a hard decision for me, because I knew I didn't have anything else I could do, and I knew I could do more, and I didn't want to just stay. it just really happened to be a timing thing where the Navy recruiter came and talked about all that you could do in the military. And I don't regret it at all. I absolutely loved. I got to see parts of the world that I one didn't know existed. I When the dispatcher told me I was going to Iceland, I was like, where is that? I didn't even know, but I had such a wonderful experience. Not all good. And let me just tell you, I don't want to mislead anybody to think that it's all, unicorns and rainbows. I, as a female, experienced my share of issues being a female in the military, but I loved having that uniform on.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
What role did you have when you were in the Navy, or what rating?
Yeah, so I ended up being data processing, but and this is how much I actually just I wanted to go in as quick as possible. I went in unrated, meaning they took me in and I was able to pick my occupation once I got through boot camp, basic training and whatnot. So I didn't have a specific rating when I went in. The good news is I got through boot camp really well and did really well. And after boot camp, because there weren't enough female, we called them company commanders in the Navy, like drill instructors, they chose 5 females from the 2 sister companies, my company and a sister company, to quickly graduate, put on a different uniform, and become an instructor for the next set of recruits coming in. So I got
Wow.
chosen to do that, which was amazing because I'll never forget. I went to the interview. We had our they called them dungarees uniform on, and the hem fell out of my pants, and I was so nervous that I was going to be found out that I can't even hem my pants correctly. But I ended up getting the opportunity, and so immediately left boot camp, became an instructor. And I'll never forget, one of the recruits was working with, and she was struggling so much. And I just said, I remember saying to her, just do what they ask you to do. Don't think about it. Don't even think. Just do what they ask you to do, and you'll get through it. So, it was a great experience. And then I went from there. I went to Iceland. I got stationed in Keflavik, Iceland, fortunately at a naval air station. So got to be around P3 Orions and all the naval aviation there. So went there, and my first assignment there was just cleaning the captain's office. I was just part of the, kind of the crew. And I had to clean the captain of the base, Captain Robert Berg. I'll never forget him. I had to clean his office as my job, and I had to go in at like 6 a.m. to get his office clean before he came in. And I'll never forget, he came in early one day and just like really like, I was just so nervous. Here's the captain of the base, and I'm this little E2 enlisted, peon person. And he sat me down and he said, officers deserve respect, but we are human beings. We put our uniform on one leg at a time, just like you
Mm.
do. So give respect as it's due, but don't be intimidated and don't be afraid. And I will never forget that conversation because it truly helped me see and have a different perspective about how to address, officers and just leaders within the military. So I ended up choosing data processing, which was a great career. I got to track submarines, do data analysis, and send that down to Washington and NORAD. And at the time, of course, it was during the Cold War, so we were very attentive to Russian submarines at the time, and so it was just very exciting. Although I didn't really understand all that then, looking back on it now, I'm like, wow, that was pretty cool. I was doing some really good work. But so I ended up in data processing, and I advanced very well in it, and did anything from, again, tracking submarine data to running payroll for the Navy to being an account executive for the Navy. At the time, they had a Honeywell system that civilian companies could buy computer time on. It was, back in the early 80s, so it was not everybody had a computer on their wrist at the time. And so I was their liaison. And so it was just just really a great experience. Again, not all, roses and unicorns, but I do remember most of the best parts.
Thanks for sharing that.
A pleasure.
And you said you were in for 8 years?
9 years.
9 years. Thanks. What and is was that two contracts?
So yeah, my first enlistment was about 5 years, and then my second one was 4 years. Yes.
So when you were getting to the end of your second enlistment, what was your headspace like? The decision to go again versus to make the jump into the civilian sector?
Yeah, great question. So, really, a technicality. At the time, I was going through a divorce relationship ending. My husband at the time was in the Navy as well. I had a 3-year-old daughter. And so I had orders from Pearl Harbor to Monterey, California, the weather station out there. And in the meantime, I had to go to Quantico, Virginia for programming school. So I went to programming to learn how to code in COBOL and Fortran in order to go out and be able to forecast weather and do all the trend analysis and stuff. So when I got to Quantico after leaving Pearl Harbor, I was through the COBOL training, and the instructor came to me and said, first in the class, get into Fortran. Instructor says, you didn't sign your reenlistment papers when you left Pearl Harbor. So you either need to sign them now or you need to leave. And so at the same time, I had put in for an officer package. I wanted to be an officer. I thought being an officer, I could change the Navy and we could do things a little different. So lofty goal there, but I'd worked for 2 years to put together a package for what they call a limited duty officer program. And I went to school, I did volunteer work. I had a perfect package, recommendations from rear admirals, vice admirals, all these great things. Aced my interview. And when I submitted my package that year, they did not rate any data processing or administrative officers. So they didn't even open my package. And I was so distraught over that because I'd worked so hard and it's something I wanted so much to be an officer, that I was like, wow, this is a sign. And at the same time, so I heard that news and then I got hey, you got to sign your papers or you're out. I was looking at being a single mom in California, very far away from my family. So I wouldn't have had any sort of support. And another 4 years would have put me over the 10-year mark. So it would have been 13. And at that point, I would have had to say, I got to stay for 20 at that point. And it wasn't a decision it just wasn't something I wanted to do at that point. So I chose to get out and I left the Navy on April 1st. 1988. I'll never forget. Everybody was like, it's April Fool's Day. Are you sure you want to take off the uniform? Like, that's what I'm doing. So, yeah, that's how it came about.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, the sign I think is something you may having known a number of veterans. I think a lot of us could relate to that when confronted with that decision to transition out. When weighing the cards, an environmental signal. There's a series of things that kind of fall into place,
Yeah.
and there's gravity that seems to be pulling you to the adventure outside of the gates,
Yeah.
outside of the camis. And I think I would love to hear your experience about your experience after leaving. April 2nd. It can be surreal to have your EAS paperwork. Your DD 214 is what we have in the Marines,
Yep.
and you're driving off base for the last time wearing a T-shirt,
Yeah.
and it can be surreal.
Yeah. Yeah,
What
for
was that
sure. I
like?
mean, they back then they didn't have a TAP program, so the transition assistance program like they have today. So I literally in uniform on March 31st going to collect, get my medical papers signed, getting my last paycheck, and the next day getting up and not putting on that uniform and leaving the base. And yeah, it was surreal. But I was 27 and just so like full of I can do anything. I mean, I've just spent 9 years, 2 years in Iceland, 3 years in Pearl Harbor, here and there, Brunswick and Jacksonville in between, and so I didn't think anything about it. I really didn't have any trepidation over what was happening next because I just literally had a sense that no matter what it was, I could handle it. And I think that is part of some problems that veterans face when they do get out of the military. They don't have an expectation of how the transition is going to go, and they just immediately think, oh, I can handle this. It's like, this is nothing. But then reality can set in. As I left the base that day, I had no worry until I had to go find a job as a civilian. And that's really where the barriers started and the worries started. Well, wow, I mean, I just left a really good job, and a really steady paycheck, and and a really great community. And now I'm out here all alone. And my first job out of the military, I went to a staffing agency and got a temp assignment. I'll never forget the first Friday. I was like, okay, so where's everybody? Anybody barbecuing this weekend? Because in the military, every weekend we would get together. Somebody was
Yeah.
getting together, right? And so I remember people looking at me going, what? Wait, we see you all week. We don't need to spend time with you on the weekends. I was like, wow, that was a shocker to me. I was like, oh,
Culture shock.
yes, I've lost that community. Not to mention the fact that going to work, having to choose what I was wearing was also another culture shock. It was like, wait a minute, somebody's not telling me what uniform to put on today. I get to choose what I'm wearing. So that was a little bit of an adjustment as well. But that initial day, that initial probably first week leaving the military, I really didn't think anything about it. I knew I'd
The
made the right
spirit of
decision.
adventure.
Yeah, it was. It really was. Until I had to take that next step and try to
Mm.
get employment.
Mm. How did time unfold in that first job, that temp role, in being confronted with the culture shock? We see you all week,
Yeah.
you figure out what to do on your own this weekend type of an environment. And how did that evolve over the months and years? Did you switch to another group, or was it a place that you stayed with for a little bit of time and worked to grow?
Yeah, well, again, that was my first job out of the military, and as I mentioned before, in 12 years, I had 10 different employers. So I didn't stay anywhere for very long. Um, and looking back on it, I wish there were several opportunities that I had to grow, but I just either didn't have the opportunity to like really get it out there. Or, I don't know. I got bored. I would get bored, or I would feel like the red tape of trying to get anything done was just not for me, or I wasn't being challenged, or given the opportunity to advance. And so I would leave, and I did. I mean, I stayed at that first job probably 6 months, I want to say. But I met the person that my second job out of the military, I met him because of somebody I worked for at the first job. So I was able to go and work for an attorney, and then got stolen back to the same company, but really part of a new division. It was American Transtech when they first started out. I'm like a plank owner. What do you call them? Like one of the first 5 employees of American Transtech. So that was pretty cool. But went back to them, and then again, just didn't feel like that was going anywhere, and said, "Well, I'm going to move to California now." So picked up my daughter, and we moved from Jacksonville, Florida to California without a job, because I just thought, well, I can do anything, right? I can get a job. A career is what I really needed, and that's what didn't happen for me in those 12 years, until I got to that Fortune 500 company. But again, there, like what happens with a lot of veterans, you get pigeonholed into something, and you stay because maybe the money's good, or whatever the circumstances are. But then you start to get that pull, and that's what happened for me. I started to get that pull of, I really want to help our military community. I really want to do something that makes a difference, and I'm not just a number to a CEO making lots of money and wouldn't know me if he stepped on me on the street, right? I want to make a difference. And so that pull of, I have more to give, and I have this idea of this skills based model, eliminating resumes and eliminating application process, which are barriers. I need to do something with that. So I took the leap of faith and just made it happen.
That brings us up to closer to current day.
Yes.
Well, maybe before we talk about current state, I think we're close to that. The moment in time where you're talking about how a lot of veterans get pigeonholed into one place, and the golden handcuffs
Mm,
analogy comes to mind.
sure.
Um, I think so many people in that space of having a good job, stability, security,
Yep.
the environment is never safe. Maybe sometimes it gets more dangerous, like in recessions and stuff. But it's never going out on your own and leaving a job, a stable career behind is never um, an easy move to make.
No.
But I think so many people have, to varying degrees, that draw, that heart calling
Absolutely.
to follow their vision and their dream, and there's the risk assessment. They have family, house, these things, and to me, I think of being on a diving board. That feeling you have, it's like before you jump, maybe I shouldn't do this.
Hmm.
Uh, Some people make the leap,
Yeah.
and I wonder what it was, what brought you to that place. You've got a lot of the fearlessness and the drive that's been a consistent theme throughout your career and your
Yeah.
life. I wonder if you can codify that and try to articulate the thought process that had you take the leap in a way that maybe others could hear and resonate with.
Well, there's two sides to it, of course. There's that fearlessness that you don't know what you don't know, and maybe you should learn a little bit more before you take the leap. There's always that there's a lot of people that will say I take risks that they wouldn't take, but I just have this belief that no matter what I do, I will be okay, and I can make it work. And I think part of that is from my childhood because I just had to fight in my family for myself and others. And then in the Navy, I had to have that fight for females being able to do what we can do and advocate for them. And then throughout my career, as back in the civilian, I had to always have that fight. And so, and I survived. I mean, I've done very well. I'm here, and I have a great family and a great life. So I had a fearlessness that said, I can do it. I mean, regardless of how it works out. On the flip side, nothing is ever as easy as you think initially. While it might look like, yeah, that pool, it's deep enough, or that's not so far, until you've already off the diving board and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, this isn't as easy as I thought. So there are, I think, my advice to people, if you're looking to take that leap, is do your homework. Really think about your why. Are you in this good and bad? Because there are going to be extremely low lows and extreme high highs in building a business or being an entrepreneur. And so you've got to be ready for that. You've got to be buckled in when the lows get low and asking for help. You've got to be open to asking for help, which is not something veterans are good at, and certainly not female veterans, because as I struggled through being a female in the military, asking for help was a sign of weakness. If I had to ask for help, people would say you really shouldn't be here. And so getting out and then and getting through those lows and asking for help, you have to be able to do that. You've got to be ready for that. And then when you've got those high highs, you can't take it for granted. You have to celebrate the high, celebrate the win, but then say, what did we do in this win that we can carry us through the next low? And really understand that. So it is not easy being an entrepreneur. It is. I read somewhere. I don't know who said it, but being an entrepreneur is you're only crazy enough to work 100 hours a week because you don't want to work 40 hours a week for someone else, which is it is the case. And you are going to
Yeah.
work a lot of hours when you work for yourself. But the upside to that is I know that for every hour I put in, I'm making a difference in somebody's life and my life. I'm putting that investment back into myself and to my business instead of someone else's pocket. So it's really rewarding. But it's I would say again, for anybody who's thinking of taking the leap, talk to your family and your loved ones, because they may agree to go on the journey with you, but be realistic. Sit down and say, if I don't make any money in the first year, in the first 3 years, in the first 5 years, what does that look like for us? And how will we get through that? You've got to be realistic about the struggles that you will have, because no matter what, entrepreneurship, you will struggle. There will be struggles. And you have to be prepared for that, because once it hits you and you're not prepared, you like flounder, and it's like, okay, now what do I do? So sit down with your family, advisors, friends, who, whatever that you're working with, and be realistic, pros and cons about what you're doing. But you've you've got to know your why. Why do you want to run this business? Why do you want to own this business? And I will tell you flat out, if you just want to run a business to make money, you won't be in it for very long. There are some people out there that can make millions of dollars, but that success won't last forever if that's the only reason you're in it, um, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know, um, honestly, what my fearlessness really came from, other than I have just always had to fight for myself and for others throughout my entire life. And so being that, that person, going into business was, hey, it's just another fight.
Thanks for sharing that, Robyn.
Mm.
Once you talked about the once you make the leap, you learn how far it is, and it's always more difficult than it appears to be
Yeah.
before you cross the threshold.
Yeah.
What was the experience like in the months after you made that leap, forming a business for the first time and learning those lessons through trial by fire?
Yeah. It was tough. There was a lot of tears. Um, the first year, I had sold a house, so I had some money from the house, which I invested in the business and started our programming. So we got a developer to start writing the algorithm and the AI that we use in our translation and matching. And so I had that little bit of money, so we got started. At the same time, I went to a big bank, and started to apply for a loan, and just hit all the details, got approved up to a point, and so we continued on with the development with the money we had, and then at the 11th hour the bank pulled the rug. And so what was going to be $100,000 in the bank for us didn't happen, and I was left scrambling, and very much at a one of those low lows, very lows point of what are we going to do now? And so started. I mean, that was 2018, and I remember going to a friend, my best friend from high school. Her son got married in December 31st in 2018, and we went to his wedding, and I had no money. And I was like, I'm putting two credit cards together to be able to go on this trip, and thinking, how am I going to do this? How am I going to finish this? And how am I going to continue? We got home from that trip, and my husband had a 401k that they'd screwed up the calculation years and years ago. We had a check in the mail for a few $1,000s, and it saved us. And it just, like, those things kept happening, but I think it happened because of the belief in what we were doing, and us wanting to make a difference for people, and that we were always going to be taken care of. We were going to work hard, but we were going to be taken care of, and we didn't take that for granted. But that first year was hard, and having to think about, wow, what do I do now? I've already started investing. I've already spent 50,000 of my own money, in this program. I can't stop now. It is the right thing to do. And here we are, 6 years later, really still having some of those same conversations. We're doing the right thing. How do we get more traction? How do we get more people to adopt a skills based model? And how do we get more, candidates into the program? And we're still kind of having some of those same conversations. But from what I hear from other entrepreneurs, you're going to always have those conversations because, again, you're going to have some great wins and you're going to have some low lows, and you got to be able to pivot through that and figure out how to manage it. But that first year was tough, and it got a little easier. I made some decisions that I've learned along the way. The person that I hired to be kind of our operations person turned out to not be the right person for the role, and so I took too long to decide that was not working. Which, and people will tell you, is it hire slow, fire fast, or I think that's
Mhm.
the so I learned that lesson. And I would tell you now today, I'm very good at, hey, if it's not working, we need to move on. It's got to happen because you'll spend a lot of money. We've also been burned by service providers that have come on and said they could do things and wanted to be paid up front and then didn't deliver. So we're very conscious about our service delivery and try to do everything we do with a very high level of integrity, which can also be, it can't always make a lot of money if you got a lot of integrity. So, but we're happy with that. We're okay with that. But yeah, but it's so rewarding because you help that one person see what their skills are, or you see them get into a great career, help their families, help that military spouse who's been struggling. And it's so rewarding. I mean, what I get to do every day is just absolutely phenomenal. So
Thank you for sharing that. Robyn, what does the journey look like for one of these candidates that you're helping from the first moment where they're meeting you, they're interfacing with you, to the success point?
yeah. So it can vary depending on where they are. So we don't scrape anything off of the internet. So we're not one of those job boards or that, a staffing company that's going to scrape a bunch of jobs and throw them out there to you. We are a very intentional model. So when a candidate creates their profile for free, it's all free for them to do that. They're going to put in their occupation, whether it's military or civilian. We translate that into skills for them. They can edit it. So if they don't want to do something they did previously, like security, we use the example of infantry a lot. And if you don't want to do security, you can take that out, put in other skills that you've earned. The beauty of our program for candidates is they don't have to search for jobs. They don't have to try to fit themselves into the box or be an imposter in a job description. They are just defining who they are based on their experience and getting that set of skills. Then they put in their career preferences, like where in the U.S. they want to work, that they're willing to relocate. They put in their salary requirement, what their needs are, any education certifications that they have, and that's it. They sit back, then they don't have to search for jobs, and then they're getting matched automatically to employers who choose the skills they need and then get matched to candidates. So it can be up and down. We could have somebody get matched right away and get a job right away, get an opportunity right away. It could be somebody that's been in there for a while because they live in an area we don't have an employer at this time. Because our program is intentional, again, we don't scrape employer information off the internet. Our employers come to use our program because they want to connect with the military talent that we have. So it's a very intentional program. So it can be very quick. We've got an example of a veteran getting out of the Navy in Jacksonville, wanted to move to Baltimore. We had an employer happened to be in Baltimore. They connected first day he created his profile, and he got the interview and got the job, and now a year later he's super happy. They are super happy with him. So it can happen that fast, and it can take a little bit longer. We're very open to helping our candidates with other resources, though. So if a candidate has their profile with us and is not getting any matches or not getting any results, we're happy to help them with other resources in our network as well until we have an employer in their area. Some people can't move. They're not willing to relocate, or they just can't relocate. So if they're in a specific area that we don't have an employer, it take a little bit longer for them to match. But again, the beauty is they're getting matched on the skills that they are proud of, comfortable in, and good at, instead of looking at a job description and saying, I might have done that task, or I'm going to say I have, and just so that I can get an interview, because that's really what it takes in the traditional, job, application process. So yeah, it can happen fast. It could take a little bit of time, but we're always here to help with other resources as well.
Thank you for sharing that. I would have liked to have gone through that myself when I was initially transitioning out back in 2014. It sounds
Mm,
like a very valuable experience and process for
me too.
transitioning vets through.
Yeah. Awesome.
When you look back over the whole journey, and if you could cherry pick some of the resources, like the books or the trainings that you went through that had the greatest impact on your career and on the way that you see the world as a within a professional context, uh, what what book or what training material would you or information would you point to someone that had the biggest impact on you?
That's a great question, because I read a lot. Unfortunately, I don't really have a good retention of things, but I would say anything that helps you believe in yourself. Anything that you can get your hands on, whether it be a mentor, whether it be a book, whether it be a podcast, whether it be a training session, just absorb it and go after it from believing in yourself, whatever it is. We all have things to learn, right? We never, if you stop learning, to me, you stop growing, and you just stop. And so always learn, always be learning, but anything that can help you believe in yourself, because if you're transitioning to a new career, you're starting a business, you're in one of those low lows of your business, the first thing that's going to be tested is your belief in yourself. So anything that you can do, any training you can get, any podcast you can listen to. David Meltzer is absolutely wonderful. I know I keep mentioning his name, but he's been, and I've only known him for a couple of months, but he's truly been somebody. Simon Sinek, I love love his. I get his messages every day, but it's truly about keeping that belief in yourself and knowing you're valuable. You as a human being are valuable, and don't let anybody ever tell you you're not. It's hard to hold on to that, because when you're applying for job after job after job in the traditional sense, and you're putting those applications in and you're rewriting your resume every 5 seconds, and you're not getting any responses, or you're getting the canned, we're looking at other candidates, or just you're getting those rejections. You have to be able to continue that belief in yourself, that there is an open door there somewhere, and you just got to keep moving forward and finding it. So again, nothing specific. I'm not good at remembering names of things, but anything that you can learn how to keep that belief in yourself at the forefront is absolutely invaluable. So
Thank you for sharing that. Robyn, you're a wealth of insight and inspiration.
thank you so much. I've had my journey, that's for sure.
So we've talked about where it all began, what brought you to where you are now.
Yeah.
Perhaps a entirely another discussion would be where you're going. You want to share as we land the plane here a glimpse into what you're excited about for the future and where your vision is taking you next.
Yeah. Well, it's all about skills-based hiring and skills-based modeling for employers in a lot of different venues, not just employer to candidate one-on-one, but things like unemployment, being able to use our platform, use our technology for everybody that's on unemployment, and save lots of dollars doing that. using it for the justice involved as they're coming out of the incarceration in the prison systems and not knowing what they're going to do next, being able to use our technology to get them a list of skills that they can understand what their value is and where they can go next. So this the sky is really the or the moon, the Milky Way is really the limit for us. There's so many possibilities of what we can do with this technology. The bottom line really comes down to for us is we want to help as many people as we can, both on the candidate side, helping end underemployment for veterans, which is 16% more than non-veterans, ending unemployment for military spouses, which is 21%. Three times, four times, eight times the national average for non-military spouses. Justice involved is 27% unemployment. So we want to make a difference in those spaces and really help people. There's an abundance out in this world. It's just a matter of making the right connections, and we want to be that connection for people. So,
Wow. Love that. Thank you, Robyn.
my pleasure.
So it was an absolute privilege connecting with you today to showcase your origin story. Thank you again for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, ma'am.